Hey, sports fans, Larry Eder. Once again, it's your favorite program, Socializing the Distance. This week we have a real treat. I've been stalking Will Lear for a while, and he's finally agreed to chat with us. This is Will Lear, a Under Armour professional athlete, also 14 years of professional athlete, one of America's top distance runners. And you're also on the USATF board, aren't you?
I am, board of directors.
So awesome. Well, Will, it's great to see you. Now, where are you guys? You're in Colorado, right?
We are high up in the mountains in Colorado. Yeah, we are currently up in Crested Butte. Our technical home base is sort of in and around the Boulder area.
Yeah.
But, living up at 9,300 feet above sea level right now.
Now, what is that like when you first start training there? I remember training at like 8,800 feet up in Yosemite. I would do that every summer, and it took me kind of like a week to two, started feeling human. What is it like at 9,300 feet?
Well, mind you, the top of Half Dome is just about 10,000. So the valley floor is quite a bit lower. I think it's just above 6. But it's a real indicator of if you've done the work before you got up here or not. There's a couple of different ideologies in training up here, one of which is get fit quick, because you kind of have your body has no choice but to adapt to these new stresses. And the other is, to really harden the sword. And when you've done a lot of that groundwork, that base building, you can come up here, and as long as the runs are flat, it's not super different. The moment you encounter a hill, you find yourself, can we use profanity on this?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Breathing out your ass.
Okay,
it's incredibly difficult. It's incredibly difficult to run up here. Yeah.
Okay.
Ask anyone that's ever tried to race Emma Coburn's 5K that she puts on, the Elk Run 5K. It's this maybe the single hardest race I've ever done.
Wow. So you went to Pomona in college. What if you were talking to a room full of college kids right now, and they would have a ton of questions for you? But the first question would be, what's the biggest difference between being a college athlete and being a pro athlete?
It depends on where those kids go to school, right? Okay. And so Pomona is a 1,500 student Division III institution where sports were a part of the college experience. They were not a focus. And we were definitely, that was reinforced to us all the time. Whether it was through budgetary constraints or, hey, Professor X, can I take this exam before or after I go to the national meet? What's the national meet? It's like we weren't exactly granted. I would, at that same token, I have to amend that statement a little by saying, as I became more and more nationally competitive and started winning national championships for Pomona, my professors were some of the first to jump on the bandwagon of support and say, whatever you need to do, we'll help you, because this is so awesome. We've never had a student athlete do this before. I think at some of the powerhouse D1 programs, honestly, it's easier to be a college athlete than it is to be a professional athlete, because you have a whole series of an office full of people who make your life easy. They book your travel for you. They tell you what races you're doing. They tell you what heat you're in. They enter you in races. They give you a check every month so that you can pay your rent and put food in your mouth, or they have training table, whatever the heck that means. At the Division III level, it was just kind of like being a normal college kid. But then we went to practice every day or twice a day. So I think that the largest differences between any real college versus professional transition is just the responsibility. Unless you join a team wherein that team has some sort of official administrators that take care of a lot of the planning duties, you're often left to, booking your own plane tickets, or you maybe have an agent that does that for you. But it's just a lot of these little things, like finding a massage therapist, finding a chiropractor, and ones that you like, not just ones that are at campus. There is no such thing as a post-collegiate training room. You sprain your ankle, you got to go find someone that can help you fix it. You got to go find a PT somewhere, or have that person already on your team. And I say team is like the collective. That's your coach, that's your massage therapist, that's your chiro, that's your sports psychologist, that's your nutrition, your dietitian, your strength coach, your family, your friends that you surround yourself with in order to be successful. Whereas in college, it's sort of all built in right there.
What? Who was your coach at Pomona?
The Venerable Patrick Mulcahy, 36 years the head coach at Pomona College.
Now, what was Patrick like as a coach?
Pat was, I would say Pat was like my first in a long line of old school coaches. He very much was, he had his ways.
Okay.
He had sort of like all great old coaches, a garage full of yellow Lego pads filled with workouts from the best athletes to the worst athletes that he's ever coached. And, sort of when I came along, he had to start digging through the 70s, the last era when there were some decent middle distance runners at Pomona College, and went to what worked for them and said, all right, this is what worked for our previous school record holder. Let's do these workouts. And I think Pat was a great coach for me because he used to have these sayings that, like, honestly would just get you fired now. He was a tenured professor of sociology. So he sort of had a little bit of cushion underneath him to harangue us. There's another H word that I could have used, but I'll say harangue. He would say, I get paid the same if you're here or not. It's like, it's Division III sport. Like, his salary is not predicated upon our performance necessarily. And a lot of that was his version of motivating us through, like, this is a hard sport. You have to want to be here. And if you're going to be a pain in my ass, then, like, you might as well not be here. If you're going to be a pain to your teammates, if you're going to make it hard for everybody else at practice, then, like, you know what, we're kind of better off without you. So it forced a sort of a mentality at practice that was very, we were all the athletes on the team lifting each other up. And everyone came to do their job. And if you didn't, your teammates got on you because Pat, you have a bad race. He'd say, well, they shoot horses, don't they? And
wow.
And like, it's, a lot of these like old school one-liners that I just feel like athletes today are a bit too soft to handle. You get a blue chip recruit at some D1 school and his coach says that, well, he's gone from NAU to Washington or Washington to Oregon, or that if that kid thinks that his entrails smell like roses, then it's tough to get that tough love is something that I think is a little bit more, maybe more rarefied these days in the world of coaching. Now, do I think that's a good thing? Probably, because not everyone needs to be treated that way. But the turning point in my career with Pat was when I started to become a true student of the sport, and very much respected my coach's tenure and his knowledge, his wealth of knowledge in terms of the sheer number of athletes that he coached.
Yeah.
But then being able to come to him and say, like, hey, I was reading Jack Daniel's Running Formula. It was like one of the books I read over a winter break once. Or like Steve Scott's The Miler. I mean, like, gosh, these workouts don't seem like anything like I'm doing right now. And he's like, all right, well, let's try it. We'll see what happens. And sort of the moment that I had a bit more stake in the game, a little more like I was contributing to my success, telling, it wasn't just the gaffer telling me what to do.
Yeah.
I think that I was able to truly buy into the program and buy into, like, all right, man, I wrote down 20 times 400 today. You better do it, because if you don't, this was your idea. And that's like a very basic example, but it was a really great experience. And some of my best friends in the world came from being on the team at Pomona College.
Cool. Yeah. And I just interviewed one of my buddies from 1980, 81 at Santa Clara. So same kind of a feeling. You were coached, and I'm going to kind of go in succession because the brain kind of goes. So 2008, was that your first Olympic trials?
2008 was my first Olympic trials.
What was that experience like?
Life-changing is probably like the easiest way to put it.
Okay.
I joined the Oregon Track Club to be coached by Gags, sort of the fall of 2007. So I wasn't even really a year removed from nervously towing the line in the prelim at the Division III national meet to standing in front of 20,000 people at a packed Hayward Field at the first Olympic trials there since 1972.
Yeah.
Being a part of the OTC that year was a really special experience because of the trials coming back to Eugene and the community like really embracing this idea of reinvigorating Tracktown USA. Vin did a fantastic job with Vin and Mike Riley. I mean, both of them, that whole organization just like built a product there that I would argue we haven't really had in Olympic trials like that since. The facility was maybe not what it was in 2012 and 16, but that fandom, that energy that you felt was it was crazy. And then we also called it the IL run. Every time we drove over the Ferry Street Bridge field for practice or up to South Eugene for practice, so 3 times a week, or just to go downtown for dinner, there was this sign, this illuminated LED sign that was a countdown to the Olympic trials. So, the whole team, we start getting there and you don't really notice it in the fall. It's saying like 200 days or 215 days, whatever it was. And then sort of like you blinked your eyes and saw all of a sudden it was like 22 days to the trials. And like every time you drove over that bridge, it was like a cold sweat would just take over your body. And it's like, oh shit, I'm not ready. What am I doing here? But that result, so I got 4th that year. That result was probably what catapulted the rest of my career. Coming out of Pomona, where all my friends were going to work for Google or Apple or Facebook, or were going to pursue PhDs, or they were consultants with McKinsey, or whatever. They were making boatloads of money doing something that was pretty interesting. I took the less traditional route of being very poor as a unsponsored distance runner, but that result was like, I started treated that year, 2007, 2008, as like, let's give it a shot, see what happens. And then that result combined with some of the stuff I did the following summer in 2008 was where I got my first endorsement deals. And that sort of like paved the way to turn running from this passion that I had in college in that first year post-collegiately to an actual, career.
What was Gags like as a coach for you?
Unbelievable. Gag and I still talk on the phone probably every other month for about an hour. His heart is probably the biggest heart I've ever met in track and field. All he wanted to do was people. He moved the farm team from the Bay Area up to the Oregon Track Club at Vin's behest because he could see that this was where track and field was going to be. And the guys that he coached, he wanted them to have every opportunity to perform as well as they could at the Olympic trials. And everything was about the Olympic trials. And maybe to the detriment of that group, there was so much focus on just getting to the Olympic trials that as a team, we had Nicole Teeter made it in the 800, Nick Simmons made it in the 800, and that was it. Of a team of people that, our 1500 group was a little bit weaker, but we had Sean Graham in the 5000. Tom Brooks, who had made the team in 2007, the steeplechase, and a bunch of other guys that were all on the starting line. But there was just so much emphasis on getting there that it wasn't about treating it as a stepping stone to the games. It was sort of like a bit of an end in itself. And I don't know, Gag from day one, Gag used to call me, he still does, he calls me D4, which is his term of endearment for me. Because I was always asking him questions. I was always, Gag, why are we doing this workout? Why are we doing this? What's the point of this? God damn it, D4. You and Simmons, you guys are just a pain in my ass. And I was like, yeah, we are. And you love it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But I remember, I'll never forget the feeling the first day of when we had official practice. We're at Hayward Field, this cathedral to track and field. And sitting around and I'm looking around and every guy here has run 146 or faster in the 800. They've broken 4 in the mile. They've broken 13:30 for 5K. They've run under 28 minutes for 10K. And like coming from a D3 program where we cheered as hard for, me to win a cross country race as we would for another of my teammates to break 30 minutes for 8K.
Yeah.
Like it was just a different environment. But no less a brotherhood, like we were all out there shedding blood, sweat, and tears every day together through truly awful weather. I mean, Eugene is a really abysmal place most of the year, until the Prefontaine Classic, and then all of a sudden it's nice. But it was a difficult transition going from Southern California to a cold, wet winter in Eugene.
How long did you live in Eugene?
I was there from fall 2007 until winter 2010.
Okay. Ron Warhurst, was he your next coach?
Technically, it was Mark Roland. Roland came in when Gag moved back to the East Coast. And Mark taught me a ton about being a professional. Because, one of the downsides of having a coach with the biggest heart in track and field is that he sort of just says yes to everybody. Yeah. And so the team in 2008, we probably had certain days we had 50 people at practice because there was Team XO, which was formed by Ross Krempley, who started Runner Space. But then ultimately they would just sort of lean on Gag to be their coach. Everyone wanted Gags to coach them, but like that was sort of like the sub-elite version, if you will, of the OTC. Okay. And then we probably had, so that Team XO maybe had 23 people on it. OTC was booming up to almost 30. And there were days where it was just like, it was chaos. Yeah. And, there's no way you could command the attention of coach when there's that many people out on the track. Yeah. Gag had an insane ability to like make you feel like he was watching you, even if he wasn't. But when Mark came in, it was like there was a pretty clear chopping block that happened, and XO was no longer anywhere near us at practice. A lot of people, like anything in that post-Olympic cycle, a lot of people retired, but the team whittled down to about 15. And it was a much more hands-on approach to coaching than I'd ever had before. Mm-hmm. And Mark was a very successful athlete, Olympic medalist in steeplechase. Yeah, I know Mark. 1,500 guy, 13:25K. I mean, like he had done a lot of the things that a lot of us hoped to do. And so getting the direction of what it took from a guy that's done it was, I think, yet another extremely impactful step in, what helped me have such a long career.
What did you learn from Mark? What was the biggest lesson you learned from Mark Rollins?
That track and field really is a 24/7 job. There's a couple of times a year where you can sort of let the reins loose a little bit, but that if you truly want, and the science involved behind certain training regimens is pretty dialed in, is pretty specific. Yeah. As I said, the first in a long line of old school coaches, Gag is just like, show up to the track, do this workout. Why? Well, because I've coached 10,000 athletes and this has worked for most of them. That's why we're doing this. Yep. Mark's perspective was, about blood chemistry and which energy systems we're using and building mitochondria and ATP and, making sure after you finish your run, you get your, at the time it was Endurox, but that was like the first of the 4-to-1 protein to carbohydrate to protein ratio recovery drinks and like all this stuff and like dialing in nutrition and all of that, all the importance of everything that goes into your body fuels what comes out of it. It was a lot. It was just a lot more specific. I don't really know another way to describe it. It's like his approach was for the few. Gag's approach was for the many.
Were you with Mark when Chris Thompson showed up with Gemma?
Yep.
Okay.
They were my next door neighbors.
Wow, I just interviewed Chris a couple weeks ago after his British Olympic trials win. Yeah. And I would see you mostly at the New Balance indoor meet, and I'd see you all over the place, right? And then I remember, was it 2013 at the USA Indoor? You doubled?
Yep.
And you won the double.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the fitness level you were at that time.
I think sort of in that 2012 is probably the fittest I've ever been in Olympic trials.
Okay.
I didn't make that team because of a lack of, true preparation. Preparation is the wrong word. I missed that team because I left chasing that My focus the summer before wasn't explicitly on running that Olympic qualifying time.
Okay.
Nor was it that winter when I, probably should have flown down to Australia and New Zealand rather than pursuing, indoor goals or something like that. And like really saying like, if you don't have that time before you go to the trials, what's the point?
Yeah.
And that was really disappointing because, a couple of us tried to make the pace hot in that trials final and ended up coming back to bite me in the ass. It was just too big of a bite for me to chew. So after that summer, I sort of made another jump in my call it professionalization. So 2013, I was turning 28 years old that year, no longer in my mid 20s. Yeah. And realizing the importance further the importance of what Mark preached to me when I was too young to fully appreciate and understand it. Yeah. That, in order to be successful, you have to be a consummate professional. You can sort of mess around as a younger athlete and achieve success, but if you want to really do this, you got to really dial it in. And so that year, in that winter, I came down to Albuquerque from Flagstaff, where I'd been there for 6 weeks. Yeah. I'd had a couple of pretty good indoor races. I think I ran 3:55 against Willis. Yep. At New Balance. Yeah. Which was a fun race. And I think I ran, 8:19 or 8:18 for 2 miles.
Your 2 mile PB. Yeah.
At the Millrose Games. And so like I was fit, but I'll be the first one to admit that the first of the 2 victories at that championship was a bit of a joke. I think there were 4 people on the line for that 3K. Yeah. You still got to go out and do it, right? You have to execute. Sure. And the time that we ran was nothing special. I think it was like 8:04. But being able to do that at 5,000 feet fairly easily, recover that night, come back the next day. At that time in my life too, I was living with my parents in Los Angeles, being coached remotely by Ron. My dad was trying to recover from stage 4 cancer. Effectively an incurable form of cancer. Yeah. But, so a lot of it just took a lot of growing up on my part.
Sure.
To balance the familial responsibility with training, running more than I'd ever run before, training harder than I'd ever trained before because my goals were higher than they'd ever been before. So the second win was really a real taste of joy. The first one was kind of a crap way to win your first national title, but the second one was a real treat. My parents were there in the stands, and so that was a special moment.
That's awesome. You were being coached by Ron Warhurst, and yep. Ron, I think, is one of the most underrated coaches in the sport. I've known him since the early 80s when he was with the Heikkinens. And I've got, great fun stories of all the times, but it's interesting to me that he's had athletes like you, Willis, Sullivan, Brannon, numerous others, all interesting individuals. You guys have similarities, but you have these fascinating differences. What is it about Warhurst that he's so good, with kind of accentuating your individuality? Why is he that good with that?
Ron, as you know, as a human being, he is an enigma. He is one of the most charismatic people that you will ever meet. He he walks into a room and it's like, the spotlight somehow gravitates towards him, whether he knows everybody or he knows nobody.
Yeah.
He's, light gags, one of the largest, hardest human. If you're willing to put up with him, if you're willing to if he can see in you the love and dedication that he has and respect for the sport, it's reciprocated. And that, I think, draws these really intense bonds. And especially for me, I was lucky to get Ron in his post-Michigan days.
Yeah.
Ron retired from Michigan. I think it was the year before I started being coached by him.
Okay.
And so we had his undivided attention. And when you get the undivided attention of a genius, I think Ron is a coaching genius.
Yes.
It's pretty spectacular. When I first joined what we were calling then the Very Nice Track Club, because Ron's tagline is very nice. Mm-hmm. He actually has it tattooed on his butt.
Wow.
Oh yeah. And if you ask him, he'll show it to you.
Oh, okay. Good. All right.
The idea behind the group was to create a group of middle and long distance runners who could train together, but not have to necessarily compete against one another to make Olympic teams. So we had Willis, Lee Emanuel, multiple-time NCAA champion, Brandon Bethke, multiple-time Big Ten champion, Pac-10 champion, All-American while at both Wisconsin and Arizona State, and really myself. There were a couple other guys that were sort of like local Ann Arbor runners that were, trying to qualify for a USA's or something like that. But the four of us, we can hammer each other every single day in practice. And we go to a starting line and it's us together. It's not me versus you, because I don't have to race those guys at the trials. That was a very different, a different mentality than we had at the OTC my first couple of years, because there was probably 6 or 7 American 1,500 meter runners. And so, a workout starts getting really hard. Well, maybe someone's tucking in more than their fair share. Maybe someone's just trying to save it and trying to outkick you at the end of a workout to get that mental edge. We didn't have any of that. And we all lived together. Willis had his family, but we lived 6 blocks away from Nick and his wife, Sierra. And, we really had sort of cultivated this family atmosphere where we just did everything together. After practice, we'd go with Ronnie over to Washtenaw Dairy for donuts and chocolate milk, and we'd have barbecues. And it was just it really was this family, and we grew to truly love each other. So I talked to Nick once or twice on the phone every single week, talked to Ronnie at least once a month, if not every other week. We get on the phone for about an hour. And it's just those endearing, those lasting relationships, I think, is what's truly, that's going to be the indelible mark left on my person from track and field. This is all the friendships and family that I've made.
Was Sullivan a different generation than you, or is he? Yeah,
Sully was down when I was in Ann Arbor. Sully was down at Florida State.
Okay. All right.
Coaching there. Okay. And with Coach, what was his wife's name? Harper.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, wow.
Harper?
Okay.
Harper?
Yeah.
I never met his ex-wife, but Sully came back to Ann Arbor in a couple of years after I had left.
Okay. Talk to us about the art of when you go to Europe and you're in Europe for 3-4 weeks and you're going from it's backpack and suitcase, 800 here, 1,500 here, 5 here, 1,500. How do you juggle that?
It's not really a juggling act, it's living the dream. So you get to travel around the world to some of the most beautiful places on planet Earth on someone else's dime. And if you have the wherewithal to lift your head up every once in a while, you're surrounded by some of the most incredible athletes that walk this planet and are eating interesting food and drinking interesting wine, having interesting conversations, learning through experience. a lot of the summer season, I mean, again, I have never had the experience of being in a summer season where it was, leading up to the World Championships. I've knocked on the door just too many times of qualifying for that team. And so like a little bit of my summer experiences were sort of like a celebratory tour of, all right, go run a fast time. Just like go make some money, go run some fast times. So the serious level on those competitions, was like my season was almost over, if you want to think of it like that. Even though you're in the heart of the competitive season. You go to Europe for a hope and a prayer and an opportunity. You go to Europe for a hope and a prayer and an opportunity to get that call up, like to the big leagues, to get that Diamond League start, that you think that your body's ready to go run that PR time. You just are, maybe the races so far that you've been in haven't materialized what you were looking for. And in the midst of it, I mean, it's shocking how many people have PRs from tiny little meets over in Europe, where it's all the same Americans who were slugging it out with each other 2-3 times a week.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's like summer camp over in Europe. It's like the combination of that backpacking trip that as athletes we never got to take.
Yeah.
Plus summer camp that we never got to go to because we were always training, combined with like weddings and birthdays, which we all had to miss because we're training and racing. But like you create that sort of jovial experiences with a group of people that sort of like become your de facto family.
What do you remember about your 351 mile?
What don't I remember about it? I was actually just watching that video the other day. So Aisha had run 2014. I'd been dating Aisha for 2 years. We were sort of traveling to a lot of the same meets over in Europe that summer. There was no world championships. You're just sort of like, you're just trying to go make money and have fun. I was really nervous for her race. I get really, really nervous when she races, like unnecessarily nervous because I have no control and I don't not having control.
Yeah.
And so she was racing about 50 minutes before us. And so I went, and I usually started my warm-up an hour out. So I went and ran around for 10 minutes and then like come peek my head through the gates, watch her run. And I think that is, at the time she PR'd, she got third and ran like 4:28. And it's like it was at that moment that the night in Dublin, like the clouds sort of started to part a little bit. The wind was coming down. It had rained earlier in the day because it's Dublin. It's always raining. But it rained earlier in the day, so there's like a little bit of moisture in the air, positive ions. Everyone's getting excited. We knew that we had 2 rabbits that were going to keep the pace fast. We knew that we had a bunch of athletes that were trying to run their European Championship qualifying time, so they set up a 1,500 meters time.
Yeah.
And I remember the gun going off and feeling awful. Just felt a bit. I was like in the back of the field, just getting tossed around. And you had one of these experiences where it was like, all right, like, what are you here to do? Are you here to race or are you here to like feel badly about yourself? And it's like that split-second decision, made a hard move, inserted myself sort of towards the middle front 30% of the field with anyone who was there to run fast. We were all up there. And if it weren't for Kieran O'Leonard, that race would have been, yet another 3:56 Morton mile.
Yeah.
But he knew his strength at the time was his strength.
Yeah.
So he starts hammering the pace from about 800 out when the rabbit dropped off. And then 400 to go. So 300 to go from I guess technically 290 from the 1,500 meter time.
Sure.
This guy, John Travers, feeling good, goes for it. But like in the moment, you're not thinking about, oh, this guy's going for 1,500 or this guy's going for this. It's like all the races within a race. I'm just thinking, I just go pure competitive. Like I want to win. And so followed him down the backstretch and his move was pretty aggressive. Broke the field apart. And I think I passed Travers with about 160 meters to go and just sort of never looked back. And Pat Casey ended up getting second. So I ran 3:51. 8, Pat Casey ran 352 mid, and I think Corey Leslie was third in about 353 flat.
Wow.
So it was a great day for Americans at the Morton Mile.
Yeah, I was actually in Europe at the time because I was doing the track bum thing, hitting all the small European meets that summer. And I had seen you at the World Relays, and then I headed over. I did the Paris Marathon and all that stuff, then jumped back over, went to the European Championships, saw all the guys. And then I remember getting something in the newspaper the next morning about your race. When did you run the 1321, the 5,000?
I was like on a random Thursday at Mount Sac.
Really? Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
That was that's another, I don't like to say that I ever run many races on anger.
Okay.
That was certainly one of them. So the meet director, Brian Yokoyama, great guy. He helped me out a bunch when I was in college, just sort of maybe sliding me into a couple of heats here and there that I had no business being in because he and Pat were old buddies.
Okay.
And we had a big meet at Pomona that we'd do the same for some of their guys. So I had reached out to him, and this would have been 2013. So it was really like Mount Sac and Peyton Jordan were the 2 5Ks if you couldn't get into pre that you had an opportunity to run the qualifying time. And I had no interest in really running the 5K at the U.S. Championships, but I wanted to run a fast one. And so I emailed Brian and said, hey, what's your 5K field looking like? And I'd say this is one of the greater problems of track and field is like accountability. Like when your name is on a start list, you show up and you run.
Yeah.
But he told me, he's like, yeah, we got rabbits in a very strong international field. And I was like, great. Like every year up until that point in my running career, almost every year, we'd train to run a 5K. So we'd put a 5K on the schedule, and like that would drive these like really, really hard 5K workouts that we were doing. Because if you don't have a race on the schedule, it's sort of like maybe the training just dials back a little bit.
Yeah.
We wanted to always prepare as if we were going to race the 5K. And then inevitably what would happen is like you'd get a little stress reaction or a sore this or a sore that. And it's like, well, scrap the 5K. We're going to push the 5K. We're not going to the 5K and push a week and go run the 1,500 at Home Depot or whatever that the Adidas track, whatever that became down in Southern California. So I was committed to running this 5K. It was, 9:30 at night or whatever. We're going into the staging tent at Mount Sac. I don't see anyone that I know except for Ben Bruce.
Oh, yeah.
And I find the clerk and I'm like, hey, who are the rabbits? I'm like, oh, we don't have any rabbits. And at this point I'm warmed up, spikes on.
Yeah.
I was going to like try and tell them to go through in about 7:55 for 3K because I really wanted to go for it.
Yeah.
And I'm standing there and my parents are in the stands. My coach Pat is in the stands. Our assistant coach is in the stands. Like all these people had sort of come out to watch me run. And all that's going through my head is I step off the track right now and go up to Peyton Jordan. Like, this is stupid. There's nobody here. And so through the first 2K, I think I was rotating laps with a couple of people. But I probably led like 800 or 900 of the first 2K. And then with 3K to go, I just went to the front and just started pedaling down. And I think I ran 750 for my last 3K, all solo. Wow. About 508 for my last 2K.
Man.
And it was just, I was just pissed. I was just pissed because I was like, I'm not a collegiate athlete. This is my job. You told me you were going to have something and you didn't have it. And it was pretty disappointing. But then that experience, I think that every 1,500 meter runner should run a 5K, whether they're prepared for it or not, because you just truly learn how to suffer.
Yeah.
I remember thinking maybe at like a K to go, I was like, oh, I'm going to run like 13:15. 600 to go. I'm like, oh, I'm going to run like 13:13. I've got about a 125 in these legs right now. I'm going to just let this thing rip. 300 meters to go. All I was thinking was just get to the fucking finish line. Like, this is so painful. I'm in so much distress right now. Why would I ever, and you know, to this day, never, I mean, I ran a couple 5 cents, but it's a brutal event. It's absolutely brutal.
Why did you never run a 10,000 competitively, or did you?
I didn't, and I had no interest.
Okay. Total respect. Total respect. All right. So you've been with Asia since what, 2012, 2013?
Yep. We started dating in the summer of 2012.
I've always enjoyed watching you two and your social media, but also just observing you. What's the toughest thing about having a significant other who is also an elite athlete? What's the challenge? There must be multiple challenges, but I'll have you.
There's plenty.
Top three. How about top three?
On top of normal relationship stuff. There's certain elements of being an athlete that require total and complete selfishness.
Yes.
To the benefit of dating another athlete, we understand that. The detriment of dating another athlete is when those times coincide with one another.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to balance this, I'm here for you, I'm a supportive partner, with like, all I want right now is for like someone to cook and clean and like pick up every other part of what it is to be an adult.
Yeah.
Like, if I could just have like that partner right now versus like the partner that needs me to also do that. There's endless arguments, if you want to, I'm going to call them fights, because it's not anything other than like, when you have two people that are trying to do something physically with their body to the utmost extent of their abilities, a lot of tired bodies inhabiting the same house. And when you're tired, your emotions are drawn pretty thin. You get in arguments about things that have nothing to do with the thing. And it's just because you are both like running an ungodly number of miles and doing hard workouts, or God forbid, you're both dealing with an injury at the same time. And like truly being, I think the hardest thing is like being that unwaveringly supportive partner when you need to be, if your own racing and training is getting in the way.
There was, so I know Ashton Eaton fairly well. And in 14, I'm watching him observe Brianna at the Commonwealth Games. And I don't think I've ever seen a guy more nervous. And afterwards, I'm talking to him, and I said, wow, are you like this every time she competes? And he looks at me and he goes, totally. He goes, I'd rather go out there and compete than worry about her do stuff. Was that the situation for you?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, because we see as fellow athletes, training partners, spouses, at that time, 2014, we weren't married, but we got married in 2016 after the Olympics. But even still, before then, you're so invested in that other person's life.
Yeah.
And all you want, you've seen them put in the hard work. You've seen the dedication, the sacrifice. I mean, Aisha doesn't like to call it sacrifice because it's just a part of the job. You're not sacrificing. It's understood when you decide that you want to be a professional athlete, like the things that it requires. So we'll call them requirements of the job. You just want all of that payoff. You want them to realize their potential, which is all we're trying to do in sport, right? It's like you're just trying to realize your potential. And as I sort of alluded to earlier, it's like when you don't have control. When Ashton's out there in a decathlon, he has complete control over his result to a certain degree. He has complete control over his effort, over his, how he's interacting with his competitors and whatever else, how he's controlling himself mentally, physically, emotionally. When you're on the sidelines, if you start to see, if you're seeing your other, your person compete well, it's like the most uplifting of feelings. Like I've probably never been quite as happy with anything that I've done as I was watching Aisha win the Commonwealth Games.
That was my next question. Yeah.
So I wasn't down again. I'd probably chalk that one up to one of my greatest life regrets is not making that trip, because my own racing and competing she was down. This was early, middle of April.
Yeah.
The Commonwealth Games. And like I had a 5K that I was running a week after that or something. And not being there was emotionally so much harder for me than actually just like getting on a 15-hour flight and going, and like just being.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's, I imagine like, I mean, I don't really know any other analogs, because track and field is a sport that requires so much discipline and dedication, and it's so hard that like when you fully understand. I mean, I remember when I moved back with my parents when my dad was going through chemo, and it was the first time ever that my parents had been around me for a substantial period of time when I was in absolute full training. When you go home for the holidays, it's like, coach dials everything down. They understand that there's going to be some requirements, asks of you that bring, we're only running, most days only once a day, and we're not really going to the gym quite as often and whatever else. But when my parents fully saw what it was like to train, 115 miles a week, 2 workouts in a long run, 3 gym sessions, and how much I was sleeping and eating, and like how it was a full-time like job, it really opened their eyes. And I think that's one of the things that like the greater public doesn't really understand about what it is to be an athlete.
Yeah.
And so when your partner is an athlete, you know exactly what it has taken for them to get there, and you just want them to do well.
We're going to talk about the sport for about 10 minutes. You and I have had some conversations, sometimes fueled by adult beverages, mostly after a meet or so, when we've been able to kind of let loose. I'm asking you questions and you're cajoling me about things, rightly so. I always appreciated your comments and I use them. I'm going to make you the CEO of World Athletics. We'll do USA Track and Field later because we may not have the time right now. But I'm going to do World Athletics right now. What's the 3 things you would do to make our sport more visible right now? And again, I haven't given you any preparation on this, which is why I'm excited about it. Because I think you have more thoughts out of your toes than most people have in, if I'd given you a year,
Well, I'm not pumped full of truth serum right now either. So
yes, okay, good.
There's a chance I might be a little more reserved.
Okay.
But I think that from a international governing body standpoint, too many people have their hands in the pot. Okay. There's too many people who are trying to appease too many people. Okay. I think Sebco, at least in the tenure of my athlete career, he's the best president that we've had. I mean, at the very least, the cronyism is dialed down a little bit.
Yeah.
But when we're just speaking about it as a voting delegation, the fact that like Cote d'Ivoire has the same vote as USA track and field when it comes to major World Athletics decisions, I think is truly unfortunate.
Okay.
Now, if we're talking on an international Olympic level, Olympics are different than World Athletics. World Athletics is supposed to be a profit-making machine.
Yeah.
The PGA isn't calling India because they have one Indian golfer ranked in the top 20 of what they would like to see, or if they want to host a whatever competition. I think that moving away from these one-day, call them exhibition meets, would be a massive benefit to track and field. moving to more of that tennis structure where you have your majors. So the majors being Prefontaine, Zurich, Brussels, and then maybe throw something over in Asia, where you have these basically mini world championships that you have to qualify for on points. You have to run qualifying rounds. It's a multiple day event, so you're not just like in one day out the next. You're giving people an opportunity to give a shit, namely, and that like the competition means something, because right now I was talking with an agent this week at Drake, and we said, if you win every Diamond League as an athlete, if I go out and win every single 1,500 meter Diamond League, I make $80,000.
Wow.
That's not very much money for winning every single major competition in your sport. I don't necessarily think that just throwing more money at the sport is a solution, because there's something going on that people aren't caring. I think that how TV broad. So I said that would be like my number one. Number one is make it into 4 multi-day mini world championship events. Okay. And then you have whatever you want your major one to be. That can move each year, but that you just like tennis, you have a world ranked number 1 at the end of the year. You don't need to go to a tennis world championship event to know who the world number 1 is.
Yeah.
It's sort of like you go to the world championships, and the only reason the world championships is exciting is because nothing up until that point has held any weight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Number 2, I think these world rankings got to go. And they got to go on. Time needs to be removed as an element of importance from track and field. No one cares what the score is of the Super Bowl. They care that one team won and one team lost.
Yep.
No one cares who won, the NCAA basketball championship. But like how many points Baylor scored. All they care is that Baylor beat Gonzaga. That's all that matters. Head-to-head competition is all that matters. You can build events, and like you could have an exhibition event somewhere aside from these, 4 major Grand Prix, if you want to call them that. Where it's like, we're going to build this as a world record attempt, and let that event drive up that publicity. Yeah. But using that as a method by which you rank an athlete, I think it's just boring. You know exactly what's going to happen. There's no story to be told there. You can cut away from a 1,500 meters after 10 seconds and come back in 800 meters later. Just like, well, what happened? Well, the rabbit's going to run 152. We don't really need to see what happens. The racing happens after this. What we care about is racing. Ascribing, like points to a victory versus a time. I mean, they're sort of moving to that in like these scoring tables, but and then I think professionalizing. There are too many people out there who say that they're professional athletes. We should have some sort of methodology, whether it's amount of points that you score in a year or results achieved at a national championship, and weighting the U.S. national championships the same as you weight the Dutch national championships. Give me an absolute flipping break. Like, come on.
Yeah.
But again, too many people are making too many people happy. So I think, where was I going with this? Oh, earning a pro card. You want to be a professional athlete, you get your pro card. You want to compete in the professional track meets, you got to have your pro card. How do you get your pro card? You get good. It's like you earn your way in through, one-day test events to score enough points to get in rank, to the first rounds of the Grand Prix events. It's exactly like basically what golf and tennis do.
I like that.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to throw one at you that's been, and I haven't heard you speak about this yet. So I'm going to do something for BBC coming up about the new running shoes. And part of my thing is I compare it to when Ron Clark ran 28:11 on a grass track and 4 weeks later ran a 27:39 on his first artificial track. And I'm saying taking these new shoes right now are almost the equivalent My problem is this. I know that over the last 16 months, athletes work their asses off to get in shape, but I think it's a combination, and I like world records to mean something. I like fast times to mean something. You earned that 13:20, man. You earned it, by running your butt off. Do you think the shoe wars that we're dealing with right now are belittling the sport? Are they good for the sport, bad for the sport, or are you in between?
If you don't have access, they're bad.
Okay.
I don't ever want to see someone lose a race because their shoes are less good than someone else's. Before we had, sure, Nike's been on the forefront of spike and racing flat technology for a long time, but it's you're talking fractions of a percent versus what someone else. Everyone kind of had the same thing.
Yeah.
And now there's a lot of other, in concert with the evolution of these shoe technologies, there's a bunch of other companies that are trying to enter the space in terms of sponsoring athletes. And they don't have that technology.
Yeah.
And I think that they're either being forced to allow their athletes to wear competitor footwear, or they're like debadging Nike or Adidas.
Oh, yeah. That shit's been done for a long. I mean, I remember that in '84 that an athlete running for Converse in the steeplechase took the swoosh off, put the Converse shit on it, and ran to the final, and that stuff happened. Yeah.
Here's what I think can be bad.
Okay.
I think if the media starts picking up on stories of athletes, an Adidas athlete wearing a Nike spike, who cares? Really? Who cares? Because at that point, you're just selling, from a media standpoint, you're selling shoes for Nike. You're not telling anything important about the race.
Yeah.
I think that if in fact these shoes are as advantageous as we are led to believe that they are, then it's almost that needs to become open source technology.
Okay. Yeah.
Everyone has to be able to have access to that, either the testing, the foams, the geometry, whatever it is, such that there is a level playing field. Because otherwise, it's mechanical doping, right? If you run for company X and they make a spike that's 3% faster than, and we've never had to deal with this before, so it's a completely new problem. You need to release, that data needs to be public. You can have a patent on it, and maybe you make other people pay you for it, but it has to be able to be made available. Good news is now it seems like, at least in terms of inventory, you can get your hands on these shoes, because before, whether your company was going to allow you to wear them or not, you couldn't get them, and that was creating some really big problems from my eyes.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna go ahead.
Yeah, no, so that's pretty much the end of it.
All right, I've got 3 more questions for you. Do you have about 10 more minutes?
I got about 10 more minutes. Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Tokyo, should it happen or not happen?
It absolutely should happen.
Should happen or should not? I didn't hear.
Yeah.
Should.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do you think how will it be affected with no audience there?
How was it affected to watch the NBA finals last year with no fans?
Okay.
It'll be different, but it's about how the execution is.
You have a room full of media guys like me, okay? It's people who have been covering the sport for most of their adult lives. Let's do the given that the people who write about track and field love the sport. Sometimes they may be a little too anal about it. If you're talking to a room full of people like me, what's the stuff we miss when we're covering track and field? And what's the stuff that we need to pull our heads out about?
Read any good piece of sports journalism. It's very infrequently about the sport itself. And now I don't think that everything should be about like these stories behind that, like sob stories or whatever, rags to riches. I don't think that that's necessarily where it needs to go, but breaking it down to being more than just times and splits and results and like this person finished first and second respectively. If I read that in another freaking track and field article, I'm going to slap somebody.
Okay.
There's just so much more interesting stuff to talk about. A race it's like a concerto. There's always a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there's all and peaks and valleys in between. And being able with a discerning eye to look at a race and see, all right, Shawnee Miller, Weibo, goes to Hayward Field. It's freezing cold and pouring rain, and she runs 49.1 or 49.0, whatever she just ran. Is she poised? What does that mean for the rest of her season? What races did she do leading up to this? What races is she going to do after this? What restrictions have been placed upon her in her ability to get to races? Would she normally be going to the Diamond Leagues? Is she only coming to Hayward for the USATF Grand Prix because she can't go anywhere else? What's going on? What's the state of the sport insofar is it in this singular event as it relates to what's going on worldwide? We, like a lot of times we can get caught up of being like this. So, put the blinders on it. Like, this is, this guy. I was reading a piece after the Drake relays when, what was that guy, the kid's name from NAU that just broke, record for about 3 hours. I don't know why I'm blanking on this. Because to me, it doesn't matter. What mattered was that Morgan McDonald went to that race, sat, covered every move, made every strategic move that he needed to make, and then when it became time to separate the men from the boys, he literally embarrassed the entire field. And yet I read a piece of journalism afterwards that after 6 or 7 paragraphs of talking about how, massaging the backs of everyone at NAU, oh yeah, and Morgan McDonald won the race in this time. It's like, no, Morgan McDonald, who hasn't raced in he raced indoors. Any of his outdoor races were cut short because he almost broke his ankle on a training run down in Austin when they got 9 inches of snow and he was going down there to prepare for an outdoor meet. Yeah. Comes back and in his first race runs 13:21 to capture his extra 50 bonus points at the Continental Tour Silver meet. Executes his race strategy perfectly of running the last 600 as hard as he can because he knows that that's what it's going to take. That's a story. The fact that he runs a world or a U.S. junior record, like
Nico Young, the kid from
Nico Young and Abdi Nur, and those guys ran incredibly well. Yeah. Not to take anything away from their performance, but I guess I read that on letsbestupid.com. Those guys are writing to their audience that gives a crap about that, but it's not interesting.
No, it's
a Let's Be Stupid piece is never going to get picked up by the AP and run somewhere the New Yorker's not going to call someone to, oh man, you wrote this really incredible piece about track and field, made it sound so incredibly beautiful and intricate and complex, which it is. Yeah. But it's just not talked about. It's Nico Young. Oh, it's good for you, dude. Awesome job. See you at the trial.
We do get too terribly caught up in results and we did a piece on Valerie Allman, the discus thrower, we did one month and then Shelby Houlihan the next, and our numbers went through the roof because my guy David Hunter took the time to explain all the work that a discus thrower does to do her craft, and all the work that Shelby does to do her craft.
Yeah,
and it's about storytelling, which is what we got to get back to. All right, I have one last question for you.
Well, you just let me just.
Go ahead.
No, storytelling. It's storytelling. It's not recounting an event.
Thank you. Finally, whereabouts testing. Did you ever have a problem keeping track of whereabouts testing? And I've had to ask everybody this because it pisses me off so much. Okay.
I actually had one whereabouts failure.
Okay.
And it was before I went and competed in the Pan American Games in 2010. And I think I'd flown out that morning, and I made an error in saying, was I in Ann Arbor or New York City? Because I was going to run Fifth Avenue Mile. That was the year that Pan Am Games was in like the end of October in Guadalajara. And I get a call from USADA. Hey, Will, we're at your house. Where are you? I'm like, I'm at the Mead Hotel in New York. And they're like, okay, well, just to let you know, this is going to be a whereabouts failure, but we're going to send someone to get you will likely be randomly sampled at some point in time while you're in New York, because they're testing every single person out of competition.
Yeah.
Down to Guadalajara. And that was like a requirement of the team. No, it's literally your job. You have two parts of your job: running fast, throwing far, jumping high, jumping far, complying with USADA regulations. And if you have, I remember once when, Nick Simmons will be the first to tell you about this. He was sitting on 2 missed tests, and this was when it was an 18-month window, not just a 12-month window. He was sitting on 2 missed tests. The back of his screen was the USADA logo. He had an alarm every single day at whatever o'clock, which was update your whereabouts, because he knew if he got another one, he's out. Like, it is not that hard. It is not that hard to update your whereabouts. You can literally, and now it's easier than ever. You can like text a number, or I remember we used to have, and it was like update at USADA or whereabouts at USADA.com, whatever it was. If you weren't going to be home and you like forgot, you shoot a little email, and that at least clears you of any responsibility. It's like, oh, whether someone was literally about to knock on your door and you sent that email through, as long as it got through before they did so, you're in the clear. Okay. Totally in the clear. And now there's an app. There's like 1,000 different ways that you can cover your ass, and there's no reason to have a whereabouts failure.
Well, Lear, thank you very much. This is part 1, baby. I'm coming back to you in 2 months because I've got like 20 things in my head now I want to ask you about. And thank you for giving us the time today. It's always great to see you. I've always enjoyed watching you compete and catching up at various times. But you need to get on with your day, and I'm going to do the end of this one. This is Larry Eder with RunBlogRun. This was Socializing the Distance. We're with one of our favorite runners, Will Lear. He's an Under Armour sponsored athlete, but he's been around as a professional athlete for 14 years. This is part 1. We're going to pick up with him and have him give us the meaning of life soon too. But Will, thank you very much, man. It's really been great. Larry. Our best to you, our best to Aisha. Have a great day. Enjoy your run.
A couple of months we'll be at the trials. We'll be some of the people that are there.
Yes, that's true. That'll be our next chat. All right, talk to you soon.
Yep, see you, Larry.
Well, hello, sports fans. It's Larry Eder. Greetings from San Jose, California on this sunny day with hummingbirds chirping around me and Timothy and Larry dancing in my ears. This is your favorite program, Socializing the Distance. And today we get to talk to one of my faves, Will Lear. Will has been a professional athlete for 14 years. He's a graduate of Pomona, and he raced from 800 meters to 5,000 meters and is always looking for challenges. He's married to Aisha Praught-Leer, and he is an Under Armour professional athlete. What do I like about Will Lear? Will Lear has a plethora of opinions, and I'm always enjoying that. And there's been times when he and I've chatted post-meet. There were some libations involved, and there were times when we chatted pre-meet and post-meet, and there were no libations involved. And what I like about Will is he challenges me to look at things differently. In a lot of ways, Will's kind of old school. He's that classic distance runner, the guy who can run, or woman who can run 800 meters to 5,000 and could have run other things. I asked him, why hasn't I ever seen him in a 10,000? He said, yeah, never going to happen. That ended that conversation. I could see him doing a off-road long-distance race, marathon, 50K, whatever, before I think I could see him running a 10K on the track. But some pretty impressive PBs. 351.82 in the mile, 334.26 in the 1500, 321.55 in the 5, 819.11 in the 2 mile. I took him through some of his coaches, coach at coach at Pomona College. Then talked to him about his time with the Oregon Track Club. First with Frank Gagliano, and then with Mark Rollins, and then with Ron Warhurst. And it's fascinating to see the various developments that he's had. In 2008, he was fourth in the Olympic trials 1500, and that really shook some people up. And he had sponsorships with Nike, I believe Brooks, and also Under Armour. He's been with Aisha. I think they began dating about 2012. They married in 2016. She won the Commonwealth Gold in the steeple in 2018. Will's thoughtful, and he approaches the sport in a way that just makes me want to ask him questions. So I'm looking at this first Socializing the Distance with Will as part 1, and I hope to catch him in 5 or 6 weeks so we can have part 2. Couple highlights. I thought one of the highlights was him running a 5,000 angry in 2013, where he ran his PB 13:21:55. I also thought about his affection for his coaches, all old school folks. While at Pomona College, Will was coached by Patrick Mulcahy, who coached there for 36 years. Will had a big affection for Patrick because not only was he old school, but he was also was open to trying new things, and that's how Will really started to blossom. And it sounds to me like it was a coach advisory role. He has an affection for all of his coaches, including Frank Gagliano, then Mark Rollins, and then Ronnie Warhurst. And a coach-athlete relationship, I think, is really key into athletes developing. And Will had those people who steered him along the way. We also talked about the challenges of being with someone, having a relationship with another elite athlete, and how you worry about them and how they worry about you, and how do you balance being selfish, which is what athletes have to do at times, with taking care of someone else. We had some real fun talking about, I asked him about what he would tell media now, and he deplores the John Smith ran, 4018, and he was first and someone was second. He wants to hear behind the story, like Morgan McDonald, who got himself hurt in Austin and ran this tremendous 5,000 with a great last 600 meters. So those are the kind of things that make a lot of sense. I also asked him about making the sport more visible, and he had some great ideas there. My last question was about whereabouts testing, and he made a real clear point. He said professional athletes have 2 things they have to do: run faster, jump higher, throw farther, and also follow whatever they're supposed to do for drug testing. And he puts it in perspective. Will's a lot of fun. I think you really will enjoy this Socializing the Distance. I know I did, and I'm all ready with questions to ask him about another time. This is Larry Eder with RunBlogRun, signing off.